who's as adamant about his or her position as I am about mine, whom you think is sharp. Seriously, we know that. And another thing, we heard him say that... Hey, sports fan, Larry Elder here. Welcome to another edition of And Another Thing. This happens to be edition number 40. Can you believe it? For those of you who are not Eldorado, shame on you. Go to my website, larryelder.com, fill out the form. You're going to get a free copy of Michael and Me, my award-winning feature-length documentary about the Second Amendment. Speaking of which, do you recall earlier in January, the President of the United States asked the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, to look into whether or not John Lott's thesis is true. John Lott, as you know, is the economist who wrote the book called More Guns, Less Crime, where he argued that the more guns you have in a community, the less likely you're going to have crime, because bad guys are going to be able to get their guns. Good guys should be able to use their guns to defend themselves against bad guys. Very simple theory. That's John Lott's theory. And President Obama, to his credit, authorized the CDC to explore it. Well, the results are in. It came back that there are at least as many defensive uses of guns as there are offensive illegal uses of guns. And it turns out that the study that I cite in my documentary, Michael and Me, by Gary Kleck, was also cited in this study. And people like Gary Kleck estimate that as many as 2.5 million Americans every year use their guns for defensive purposes. And out of that number, hundreds of thousands of them believe that they would have been dead but for the firearm. The CDC study acknowledged all of that. Very quietly it came out. Also, there's a new Harvard study concluded the same thing, that there's no evidence to show that gun buyback programs, for example, work. There's no evidence to show that these restrictive laws, in fact, are working. There is evidence to show, however, that more guns means less crime. Now for your other question here. The U.S. government is suing to block vouchers in some Louisiana school systems. Now, you recall what happened in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. People left, their school system has been decimated. What the governor of Louisiana has done is he's gone to a voucher system so that the parents will get a certain amount of money that they can use to get their kid out of a bad government school into a better non-government school, and parents are lining up. Well, what is the government going to do about it? The U.S. government is suing to block some of these grants because they argue that it is a violation of some amendment, I guess the 14th Amendment, to take state funds that are earmarked for public schools and using them for non-public schools. Now, interestingly enough, we do this all the time before K and after the 12th grade. That's right. If you are in Head Start or one of these other government programs, you get a voucher so that you can use that for a daycare, even a private daycare. Similarly, when you graduate from high school and you want to go to, say, Notre Dame, which is a Catholic school, or you want to go to a public school like University of Michigan, a non-denominational school, you can use the same voucher for either school. But for some reason, there's a no-fly zone over using vouchers K through 12. And the federal government is now suing the state of Louisiana for trying to do just that. Now, we just now have had the 50th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech, the March on Washington, and you heard a bunch of these so-called civil rights leaders going into BMW, which stands for bitch, moan, and whine, about all the unequal things that black people don't have. World-class education, affordable health care, job training. All those things may very well be desirable, but they are not civil rights. So to the extent that education is a civil right, don't you think that the parents ought to be able to have an option to take a kid out of a bad school? Don't you think the money should follow the kid rather than the other way around? Yet the Democrats want to do just the opposite. The third thing I want to talk about is Syria. President Obama, as we speak, is mulling over his options, and off the record, people in the White House are saying, Nora is in Huntington Park, California. Larry, you know the home alarm system commercials you see on TV? Is it by design, or is it just coincidence that the criminals they show on them are all white? Shouldn't these criminals be more inclusive and diverse? Funny you should say that. We're told, or the flavor that you get from yesterday from the I Have a Dream speeches that were given this past weekend is that race and racism remain major problems in America. This is a little thing, it's a metaphor, but you are quite right in your observation. Almost none of these criminals that I've seen in these kinds of commercials are black or Latino. They're almost all white. Now, why would that be? Because some people, if you use a black or brown person, is going to assume that you are stereotyping, and they may not buy your product. However, if you use a white guy, what are white guys going to say? Oh, I hope you enjoyed this small excerpt. If you want to see the full video, got to be in El Dorado. Go to my website, larryoda.com, log in, fill out the form. It'll cost you about $4.75 a month, or about the price of a mocha frappuccino latte at your favorite coffee house. As you can tell, I don't like coffee. I'm a tea drinker. See you next time.